My grandfather was born in Budapest, and my father was born in the United States, so I'm a second generation American. My mother's family came from Canada, and she was born in the United States in Worcester, Massachusetts. My parents brought me up during the Depression, and they sometimes had to go without food to feed my sister and myself. And I made a vow that when I grew up, I would never be wanting of anything, or my children would never want for anything. And I think that's what drove me my whole life. But I went away in the Navy when I was 17 years old in World War II. I remember when the Germans invaded Poland, and when Great Britain declared war on the Germans. I remember hearing it on the radio. It was very clear. I never forgot it. After I finished boot camp, I was an able-bodied seaman, but eventually I was moved up to the bridge and became a quartermaster and worked on the bridge. I was very good at steering the ship. In fact, I had a lot of knowledge on the water because we were brought up on lakes in the Adirondacks. And somehow I felt that ship through my hands. And when we got to go through the Panama Canal, the pilot said, "Put the best helmsman you have on the wheel." And I was the one that took the ship through the Panama Canal on the way to the Pacific. We were on a ship leaving Guam in the Pacific, and announced over the speaker system of the ship that the war had ended in Europe, but it still hadn't ended yet with Japan. Then I went to the university, and then I went to the Foreign Service for 20 years. My first post was Vienna. Then I was direct transferred to Moscow in 1955 because I was single at the time, and the embassy didn't have room for a lot of married people. So I went to Moscow in April 1955 and left in 1959. And when under President Eisenhower, when the American government invaded Beirut, they had huge demonstrations in front of the embassy, throw ink bottles at the building. And that night I was going to the Bolshoi Theater with the secretary. We were going to see Swan Lake. And there was a woman sitting next to me, and she said, whispered in my ear, she said, "Don't pay attention to what the Russians don't feel that way about Americans. We remember what you did for us during the war." As a matter of fact, I was coming back by train from Warsaw, and I was sitting in my compartment, and this little girl was running back and forth, and she stopped, and I gave her a chocolate bar. A little while later, she came with her father, and he had her hand. And he said, "Did you give her this chocolate bar?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm working at the American Embassy in Moscow," and he was coming from the Soviet Embassy in East Berlin. And he said, "Do you have any Chesterfield cigarettes?" And I said, "No, but I have another brand. I don't remember what it was." And I said, "Why would you ask for Chesterfields?" He said, "Well, I was in the Soviet Army. We got these packages from the United States, and that was the cigarettes that were in there," which it seems that they never forgot. I think you have to live and set an example on how you live. If you do things with reason, you have high ethical standards, which I have and my son has, and I didn't tell him about it. He saw my standards, and he's reacted the same way. And I don't think they want to listen to old people anyway, because we don't know anything. We have to know a lot more than they know. But if you set an example in moderation in everything you do, and you have the highest ethical standards, they will learn from it. but you can't tell them what to do. They won't do it. If I had to tell young people how to lead their lives, one, I would tell them never to lie, to be honest, and to have high ethical standards. Young people today, it's very difficult for them to believe in God or go to church. My son tells me, well, God is everywhere, so why do I have to go to church? And I tell him, well, you have to go to church to be near God. He said, well, I'm near him all the time. I said, but when you're in church, you think differently. You're focused on what is going on in church. It's different than, I tell him, I think it's a cop-out that you say God is everywhere. That's taken for granted, but that's no reason not to go to church. And that's what I would tell them. It's very difficult for them to believe in God today because there are no outward signs. They don't really understand faith. You can be happy on earth. And you expect that you're going to be happy, when you die. But happiness is within yourself. What makes you happy? I don't know what makes you happy. I know what makes me happy. I don't dwell on the negative in life. There's a lot of things that cause a lot of stress, but that's part of life. Stress sometimes is good for you. Get you moving, get things done. I think that it would be difficult for me not to go to church every Sunday. Somebody could say, well, you were brought up that way. I'd say yes. But what's wrong with that? If that's part of the satisfaction of my spiritual life, then that's what I have to do. In fact, when I don't go, I feel very guilty about it. It causes stress. It makes me unhappy. If I don't go to church, my Sundays aren't the same.